Hi, everybody. It's 5 o'clock on a Friday. Time for Cello Chat. Today with me is Liam Jeninga, who is studying cello with me presently. How are you doing today, Liam?
I'm doing really well.
Outstanding. Now, will you tell the audience a bit about your musical background? How you're not only how you got going in cello in the first place, but your other strong artistic interest.
Yes. So I started cello 4 years ago. I started when I joined high school in our high school orchestra. And I just kind of got thrown in and I worked with the teacher in lessons to try and figure out position and all the technical things to try and get a good start at it. And of course, I looked at online resources as well. And the reason I started in high school was because my middle school only had a band and no orchestra. And my mother told me that if I wanted to learn cello, I had to learn piano first. And I've been playing piano for 8 years now with the wonderful Mrs. Christine Groth. And I really love the piano. And that's where I was able to pick up all of the musical ideas and expressions and everything sort of in that vocabulary was from piano. And so when I did start cello, it really did offer me a solid foundation to pick it up and start basically immediately trying to express with the music and really making it sound musical. So I guess my mother was right there. And, with piano and cello, I've also spent a lot of time on the stage with theater. And there's music, I've done musicals and all that, and I've also done plays. And I got into that at a very young age at a theater called Chapel on the Hill with the Good Company. And in 6th grade, I was able to audition in Milwaukee for places like First Stage in the Milwaukee Repertory Theater. And in 6th grade, I got a part at both of those places. A small part, one of the Cratchits in A Christmas Carol at the Rep, and then a small part in a First Stage show. And since then, I've been doing a lot of theater there. I love it. So at First Stage, one of the things, the Milwaukee Youth Arts Center, where First Stage is housed, they share it with the Youth Ballet and the Milwaukee Youth Symphony. Mm-hmm. So I love when I'm there working on a show or something, hearing the choir sing, hearing the orchestra playing from the concert hall down the way. And so being in that environment is really nice as well. And I'm blessed that I've been able to work piano, been able to work cello and theater all this time.
Tremendous. Now, how do these two arts cross-pollinate? How does your theater chops, as they were, help with your music and vice versa?
Yeah. So in thinking about this, both of them are telling a story, both performing on the cello and performing a monologue on stage are trying to tell a story. So as I look at each line within a piece, I'm looking at how my inflections are, as a character, able to shape the line and convey what I want and what works best with the monologue. And it's the same thing when I'm working on a cello solo. I'm looking at phrasing, I'm looking at dynamics, I'm looking at, just the little inflections, the little bits that can say what I want them to say. What expression do I want? Do I want please say or tranquilo, different things. Yeah. And even in a monologue, when I'm thinking about a cello solo, say an unaccompanied cello solo, there are different lines going intermixed and stuff. And thinking about that in application to a monologue is very, very interesting, because now you have, what are the new thoughts leaping over the last word I just said? And how does this, what I thought was a soliloquy, become a dialogue with the different ideas that are floating around in this character's head? And it's, it really transforms the piece, and it really opens up so many different avenues. And then going to the cello, thinking of it in a monologue sense, now, even in a piece of, say, absolute music, I have this big vocabulary of emotions and intentions that I can apply to different lines that I'm trying to play.
Excellent, excellent. Yes, the reading of, well, I guess foremost, one of the things I like about that, the very idea that in both cases, it's about the meaning. It's not about the words you're saying. It's not about the notes you're playing. It's about the meaning that you're conveying. And when you look at, in the case of stage directions for an actor, or the dynamics and articulation markings when you're playing cello or piano, there's still a lot of detective work that goes on. Like, why is my character saying this? And in parentheses, it says angrily. Oh, okay, that helps. And in parentheses, it says fortissimo or something. But you still have to figure out, what is my character going through? And why did I make this change here? Why am I suddenly really soft? What would have to happen for me to make that sort of change? And, and so in some cases with plays or music, we get people that do a lot of stage direction. There's not a whole lot in Baroque music, and there's a lot in, let's say early 20th century music. There's a lot of stage directions in a George Bernard Shaw play, for example, and there's very few in Shakespeare. He leaves you often to your own devices to figure out what is the most effective meaning at any given point that my character is thinking or feeling in order to best convey this.
Yeah,
so
may I for a second? With it's a similar thing in in theater and in music with stage directions. You have a lot in early 20th century, as you said, and very few in the earlier 1600s and so. I can see that in music too. Shakespeare, very few stage directions, but the stage directions are hidden within the lines. This sir I kneel, or whatever, have at thee. You know they're gonna fight, they're gonna kneel, they're gonna beg based on the line, and you can see that in, say, Bach. Mm-hmm. What the line is doing.
Very good, very good. So in fact, along these lines, why is it that you're starting to grow a beard?
Yes, I'm going to be performing Macbeth in about 2.5 months. So I thought I'd see how much I can get. This is my first time trying, so it's a little scraggly.
In the title role. No.
Macbeth himself.
Wow. And can you also stand up and show the full of the shirt you have?
Yeah.
So yes, place cello there. That wasn't your first cello clinic?
No.
You got that shirt. That was great. All right.
Second, yeah.
So thank you, Liam. I always like for people to get the opportunity to know of course, everybody's background with the arts in general and with music in particular is different. And it's, of course, it's essential, I think, for me to get to know everybody's background. But I also love how as the studio gets to know everybody's perspective and approach, and how that helps you all learn from each other. And I'm thinking that there's a degree to which viewers, it would be the same sort of thing, just that breadth of perspective. Then when you hear somebody play, that additional context just is another piece of the puzzle. So now, what were you going to ask me for the viewer? This is a extension for my current students on Cello Chat. this is kind of an opportunity to tackle some of the things that come in the inbox through the websites, for example, that some of which are just the short answer ones, the really short ones are just listed in a FAQ at the You Had Me at Cello website. But some of them don't lend themselves to as short of answers.
Yes, and that's why we're here. With the recent release of your new CD here, I was wondering what the process was required to prepare a CD for not only recording, but for solo cello. And if you would like to talk about the CD first, of course, curious as to how you picked the pieces as well.
Yes, and hopefully they go together, always trying to pick not only the pieces for a concert, but for a CD to where they'll go together in anything resembling a complementary or logical way, like 4 courses of a meal or something like that. But yes, that is not uncommon question, is that how do you prepare yourself for a concert, like the concert last night, or for a recording session? And of course, there's a lot of similarities, but there are a few differences. The fact that in the recording session, you can have a second chance, you can do it over and prefer that take to this take, whereas you don't with the audience. But that microphone that never forgets even the tiniest little thing, whereas audiences, if you really blow them away with where you were going with a particular line, they won't remember a note that's just for a moment was a hesitation. They just took that as a rubato thing or as a grace note. But that doggone microphone, you have to be sure that everything that you're playing, you want it that way in perpetuity. But at any rate, yeah, for this CD, it is somewhat of a by design and somewhat of a coincidence, I suppose. So now all my CDs with MSR Classics are unaccompanied solo repertoire, which paints a picture of somebody who really loves the unaccompanied repertoire for cello, which is true. But I think the whole reason why this one was more unaccompanied repertoire was really just because of the whole pandemic situation. And suddenly I can't play with my quartet and the piano trio. And what can I do? All right, well, I can record more of the unaccompanied repertoire. And there's so much great repertoire out there. I had fun with these. I knew, for example, I figured that eventually in the long run, I'd want to record all of the sets of 3 of the Raegers and the Britons and the Block. In this case, since one of the previous CDs already kind of had a mix of some of those, it was no longer really feasible to do all 3 Block, all 3 Britain, and other people have done that already. So, okay, why not make it a bit of a mix? So it starts with the first Block suite is, to me, the most Bach-like out of the 4, in that it's kind of can be seen as stylized dances. Of course, he has a different tonal language, but it's not as crazy different as some of the other composers, for example. And even though the Bach suites are a prelude and 6 or 5 dances thereafter, so 6 total movements, would be called sonata da camera style. These, even though they're dance-like, they're more often he'll do them as the slow, fast, like what we'd call a sonata da chiesa style. So it mixes a little bit that way. But at any rate, I think the experience of hearing the Block is kind of like, here's a composer who's also on the one hand, it's his own style entirely, and on the other hand, you can hear how he's tipping his hat towards the all important Bach suites. And then to go from there to the Casa Do, I really think, Casa Do is definitely one of those, there's a certain category of composers that we think of who we think more nearly of as a performer, and then they also composed, There's quite a few people on a number of instruments that are, we think of, okay, well, yeah, they wrote for their instrument, but they were more of a virtuoso and they wrote something for them to show off on. But Casado, I think, is one of those composers where it's clever enough writing and it's just really good stuff that he deserves to be better known in his own right as a composer. So I love playing that piece every chance I get. Really great that Starker popularized it a number of years ago, and that it's now kind of found its way solidly in the canon. It's a blast. Not easy. The spots in that second movement are just really treacherous, but fun all the same.
I have to say, it's very fun to listen to.
Oh, good. That's great to hear. It's always rewarding to hear that something was, anywhere near as fun sounded as fun as it really actually was in real life to play. And then to go from there to the Hindemith was maybe the biggest system shock. That Hindemith, while it has some gentle moments in the interior movements, for example, those massive outer movements, as short as the sonata is, they pack a whole lot of angry dissonance. I mean, which, given when it was written, I mean, a lot of the things written around wartime, it's totally understandable. And of course, there's a place for all the emotions. Well, Christopher Bunting would say, in music, there's a place for all the emotions except boredom. Okay, that one we kind of would rather leave out. But the Hindemith is just, it's I don't know, if we were to continue the metaphor to the Shakespeare plays, for example, it's definitely a tragedy. It's, and sometimes going to a tragedy is maybe not as light of a easy thing to watch as going to a comedy after a long day or something like that. But then again, there's something cathartic about making it through to the end of them and vicariously just walking 1,000 measures in the composer's shoes and thinking, wow, what would it be like to go through what those outer movements set up, and the inner movements having the slow middle movement being so introspective and timeless, for example. So go ahead.
I had the opportunity to hear the Hindemith Sonata at the last cello clinic.
Right.
And during that time, I was also in school focusing a lot on Pablo Picasso's La Guernica.
All right.
And so I've connected those two a bit. And I feel you can live vicariously for the moment through those two pieces.
That's right. That David Kaplan had performed that. And he was another one of my previous guests on Cello Chat. I love the small world connections. Yeah, he did a great job too. And then ending with the Britain. To me, Britain, even though out of his 3 suites, I think the second suite, and that's what's on the CD, is the most where you can say, okay, these are stylized dances like what we're expecting in a suite. But still, Britain's language, it's not just his harmonic language, but his melodic language and his approach to form and even orchestration. He doesn't feel obligated at all to, kind of write things in the way that other people would write them. It can be a funny experience if you go to a concert and you see Britain listed on the program. You don't know what to expect. I mean, he just so often is almost kind of like a Haydn in terms of daring you to have expectations as to where he's going with any particular thing. That it feels, to me, it would have felt funny to have put anything after Britain. It just kind of leaves it as open-ended, I think, as possible. I'm curious, what did you think of the Britain?
I can see what you're saying with it. It brings it back, but also you don't know what's going to happen when you first listen to it. Bringing it back, you start with the sort of reference to the Bach at the beginning, and then bringing it back with the Britain. And the first, in the first movement, he really says, this is what I'm going to do, the declamato. And in and of itself, you were talking about people doing all block or all whatever, just that Britain sonata is a dinner in itself.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. There are certain pieces. It's like another one that I would like to do at some point probably is the Kodai, which, and it's a good half hour long. But in some ways it's one of those pieces where what else do you pair with it on a concert? It should kind of, in a way, just stand alone. And then as far as preparing for it, let me think. Of course, you play the piece a bunch. You prepare it by practicing the piece a bunch and thinking about the piece and singing the various melodies, the timing of the various lines to try and at least, it's not like it's an essential component, but I like to sing a lot because that seems to give me a quicker way to figure out what strikes me as natural with the shaping of any given thing. And then, of course, you want to get every note right. You want to get it accurate as can be and super precise. And there's a degree to which some of that is built in more nearly on the front end of learning something, when you're figuring out, okay, what exactly is the best fingering? Can I do this fingering? Or can I get the same sound by doing this one, which would, lend better towards what's coming up? What all those sorts of things that go into deciding how am I really going to finger a particular passage. Yeah. But then as you're working through it over and over again, I think a couple of things that are, I doubt at all, are unique to my approach. I pretty much, even if I have no intention of playing the piece from memory, I like to practice it from memory. So on all of those, I'll confess I had the music in front of me, and I was looking at the music too, but there's something about the two halves of the brain. When I practice a particular piece entirely not looking at the music, it's somehow leads down different paths. It just kind of, it's a different type of creativity than when you're looking at the notes. Maybe do you find something like that with acting, in terms of once you're finally off script, that you think about the lines differently?
Oh yeah. And the ability to, there are different methods of memorization. When I'm working on a monologue, there's something I'll do in which I will, there are these phases. There's soft focus and there's direct focus. Soft focus is knowing everything that's around you. And so one thing you can do is you can go into soft focus and then really quickly focus on something and direct the monologue there, say it as quickly as you can. And what that can do is you can discover some really weird things because you're just throwing yourself into it. And I'll be honest, it works really well if you have to get something to a person, because you're directing and you're trying to get it to them as quickly as you can. With singing a piece, my Mrs. Growth always says, if you can't sing it, you don't know it. So sing the monologue, sing the solo.
Yes. And I think another, perhaps, continuation of the things that are analogous to each other in the two, when you are speaking a portion of a monologue as quickly as possible, your attention is drawn to the alliteration, which to me, when I'm memorizing particular passages, really of any of these composers or Bach or anything, certain things that naturally group together, you quickly find your putting it kind of in the muscle memory area, that it's almost like a series of dominoes. Once you knock this one down, there's no stopping the rest of them from falling together.
Yeah, I can think, you've got sequences, and, immediately I think the King Lear monologue, I heard myself proclaimed, and by the happy hollow of a tree escaped the hunt. You've got the sequence of that H sound going through, and how does it reflect in the piece? He's just been running and he's breathing very heavily.
Very nice. Yeah, it's so reassuring to oneself, even if it's not going to make sense to every listener, to feel like you have a rationale that makes sense to you for every moment of the piece. In fact, I mean, I have to admit, that's part of why, as much as I really love playing the Kodai. Do you know the Kodai unaccompanied sonata?
I do not.
Okay, it's a wonderful thing. Boy, I'm going to send you a couple of links. It's a fabulous and very, very distinctive piece. But I'll totally confess, there's parts of the third movement that I still don't know what I want to do with them. It's kind of like, why am I playing these notes? I'm going to play them because he wrote them, but I still, first movement, fine. Second movement, fine. Third movement, by golly, I'm not going to go and record that until I have an understanding of what I am trying to say.
Yes. What do they mean? As we were saying at the beginning.
Right. So, for example, sometimes people will, so I guess going back to the idea of why these pieces on the CD, not any of them have tons and tons of recordings of them out there. I suppose the one with the most by far would be the Hindemith. So there's something to be said for recording stuff that isn't already available in, by the dozen. But there's also, so for example, my quartet, the Ancora Quartet, they often will be like, well, let's not record something until we find that we have something to say that isn't already said by one of the other recordings, sort of thing. So figuring out both, what does this mean to me? Okay, and then once you find that, if you find that somebody else's recording is pretty much saying the same thing, and like, okay, well then I'll perform it, but maybe I don't actually need to deliver it the same way, just go ditto. Yeah, what he said.
Yeah, that's a big challenge when trying to perform Shakespeare or Chekhov. And I always try to remember, the only sure legacy is oblivion. So what I feel is the most important thing to say with that piece, I should say it.
Amen. I do like that. And of course, everybody's sound is different, everybody's voice. So even if I say it the same way that they do, but I'm on this Raymond Schreier cello and I'm playing it with Rick at his studio there, that Remote Planet Studios, I tell you, I mean, nothing against the other sound engineers I've worked with. I've gotten to work with some very fine sound engineers, but there's something about maybe his philosophy of either mic placement or of sound, but he just matter-of-factly puts those mics there. And then when I listen to what I get later, it's like, that's what I hear under my ear. And that's what I was expecting to hear. So from that standpoint, you're right. Everybody is going to be the only person delivering their exact sound and timing and approach. And so what do you think, if I may ask, what do you think of the sound quality of the CD?
Oh, very nice. It sounds just like all the other professional recordings. I can really hear the instrument and the range quite well. I'll say, one piece that always gets me when I listen to it, I've listened to it a few times now, is the block adagio. Is that the one? No, the allegro, the first allegro. The block allegro. Because there's sort of a voice crack in there, I can really hear you going at the cello and really working the lines with it, and just that bubbling of, and then this burst of emotion with that there.
Yeah.
And then it releases.
That's funny. That reminds me just from last week with Tanya Anisimova, me saying something similar about her playing and how she seems to just be, it's even a step beyond fearlessness of just when the music and your understanding of it means that you need to go all in, and you go all in. Well, and another thing then, as far as things like the mic placement, allowing it to be so close and not trying to hide it with anything else, to hear at times the stick contacting the string, a little bit of that, or the finger noise, for example. But, and that may not be everybody's cup of tea, but I remember, for example, when my wife and I were picking out our speakers for our stereo system, we would take some of our favorite guitar CDs where you could listen for their fingers contacting the string, because it makes it much more like you're there in person than having had it be Dolby'd or sterilized, or, you know what I mean? Cleaned up.
Could totally hear that on the final movement of the Casa Do.
Great. Excellent. Excellent. Well, okay, here's maybe one final parallel between these two worlds. And that is that one of the things that can be a challenge with certain cellists is to get them to really lose themselves in the character of a piece, and not be themselves playing that piece, but actually to try to be that piece. You're going to try to be Macbeth. You're not going to try to be Liam playing Macbeth, that genuine actor hood, if you will. And that's another thing where, whether it's here, it's the same, whether it's a live performance. So last night, for example, the Lalo and the Schumann, I did hear a number of similarities between them, but I tried to be the two different characters. And so for example, in going from the character of the Casa Do to the character of the Hindemith, I was, of course, I'm playing on the same cello and the same bow with the same strings and the same rosin, and the mics are in the same place and everything, but you want to sound like you've transported people to an entirely different personality, like somebody who's really good at reading different characters in an audiobook. They don't have to say, "said Mrs. Smith," or something like that. They just do it by being that person.
Yeah, that is the epitome of what an actor wants to do. Be the character, not be you acting the character. And it's years and years of training that is required for you to master your instrument, which is the body, in order to accomplish, to be that person. You have to be able to do everything they can do, and then shift your body to do that, and your voice and your eyes. Just if you ever get to watch a close-up on an actor, a really good actor, watch their eyes. And listening to a cellist who's mastered their instrument come to be able to bring out the nuances of the characters, being able to hear that is really a truly amazing thing.
Cool. Excellent. Yeah. I've always liked those parallels. I mean, of course, it's funny, but we find the parallels between music and dance as well, if we wanted. And you've probably even thought of also then the parallels from dance to theater, which I haven't thought about as much. All right. Well, that's probably enough on that subject to more than answer anybody who's sent that question in. So thanks so much, Liam. And thank you all the viewers, and happy practicing all weekend long. We'll look forward to seeing you at the same time next Friday.